Thanks for the introduction. So our prior research has demonstrated how sensors can potentially intrude on user privacy. The question we ask in our paper, however, is what is the threat posed by devices not intended to be sensors in the first place? In particular, how well can a hard drive approximate a microphone? So converting such a device into a microphone, however, is complicated by a few challenges. For one, hard drives are not designed as microphones in the first place. There's a large quantity of self-noise given the rapidly moving components within the hard drive, and this results in a rather low signal-to-noise ratio. Okay. So despite that, we were successful in demonstrating that an attacker can potentially use a hard drive as a microphone and potentially extract and parse human speech. So we evaluated this side channel through objective measures of speech quality and also demonstrated a use case, a case study in which we used Shazam to recognize a song recovered through the hard drive. At the end of the talk, we'll also discuss some potential mitigations. Okay. So in order to turn a hard drive into a microphone, we do require a strong threat model. In particular, we assume that the attacker has firmware resident malware. And this could be actually accomplished entirely through software. Any sort of man-in-the-middle compromise or a compromise that gives you root access to a machine will allow you to flash the hard drive over software. And as one example, in 2007, actually, allegedly hard drives were being shipped preloaded with free malware. But if you have root access on the machine, why don't you just use the built-in microphone? Actually, there are a few cases why you might want to, why that might not be an option. For example, Apple's T2 security chip actually physically disconnects the microphone when the user closes the lid. And also, in the same way that some individuals place tape over their web camera, there are examples of security-conscious individuals on the internet actually physically disconnecting or putting a physical switch that disconnects the microphone on their device. Furthermore, even modern video gaming consoles often utilize hard drives, external or otherwise. Okay. So now that we've motivated the problem, I'm going to give a brief a background that we need to understand how this works. So a hard drive's read-write head operates on sectors, which are arranged in tracks, which are essentially concentric circles on the platter. And so the hard drive controller has to actuate the head to follow the track, and it has to follow the track with extreme precision. It can actually only tolerate errors on the order of nanometers. And so this error, which we can see in the figure there, is the offset of the head from the center of the track that it's supposed to be tracking. And the green circle is the track it should be tracking. So this error is called the position error signal, or the PES. And this PES is a crucial component in the feedback control loop that is used to actuate the head, to keep the head on track. So the PES is read from special sectors on the platter called servo sectors. There are a fixed number of them per track. And as we can see in the figure here, as the head stack assembly flies over as the head flies over a servo sector, it will read out the PES and then feed that back in as input to the controller, which will then actuate the head to try to correct the error. Again, the error is the offset of the head from the center of the track. Okay. So now that we know the basics of how a hard drive operates mechanically, we can begin to see similarities between how a microphone operates and the PES. So with the microphone, the output measures the displacement of the diaphragm, as we can also see in the graphic there. The sound waves displace the microphone, the diaphragm, and then the output represents the acoustic wave. With a hard drive, the PES measures the read-write head displacement. With a microphone, the oncoming sound waves displace the diaphragm, and with the hard drive, our assumption is that the sound waves also displace the read-write head in a similar manner. And so that leads us to conclude that possibly the PES actually approximates microphone output. So to confirm this was the case, we first had to measure the PES. Under our threat model, the attacker would just read it through firmware resident malware. In prior research, Zadek et al. Actually developed a stealthy hard drive backdoor, which allows the adversary to read and write arbitrary blocks over the internet. For our proof of concept, however, we used a serial diagnostic port to output the PES and found that doing so allowed us to explore the information leakage available to such an attacker. You can see the setup that we used there. So after extracting the PES, we were still unsure if it contained enough information to sufficiently approximate a microphone. The signal could easily be too noisy or lack sufficient granularity. After all, the hard drive is not designed to be a microphone. And so we began to examine certain characteristics to see, to evaluate it. So one of the most crucial characteristics of any sensors is the sampling rate. And by the Nyquist-Shannon sampling theorem, you have to sample at 2 times the frequency of the signal to accurately recover the signal. For our setup, we can actually compute the sampling rate of the hard drive microphone as the number of times the head flies over a servo sector, which is just the how many times it rotates per second times the number of servo sectors per track. In our case, given a 7,200 RPM drive, that's 120 hertz, and there are 288 servo sectors per track. So that gives us a sampling rate of 34.5 kilohertz. So given that audible sound is between 20 hertz and 20 kilohertz, and the male and female fundamentals are at the bottom end of that, and also that the plain old telephone system only samples at 8 kilohertz, we believe that the sampling rate is more than sufficient. And so we also did some evaluated some of the spectral characteristics, and I'll demonstrate that through a demo here. Okay. All right, so oops. Okay, so I have here the same setup that I showed it in that figure. So we have here a spectrogram. The way you read this is that on the x-axis we have frequency, on the y-axis we have time, and the color denotes how much energy is at that frequency. And so we can see that at the baseline we have a fair amount of energy concentrated in 1.9 kilohertz and 8 kilohertz. So that's kind of where the baseline noise is. I have here one of the original 1960s Captain Crunch Bosun whistles, which famously plays a 2.6 kilohertz tone. So if the PES does indeed approximate the output of a microphone, then if I play this whistle at it, I should expect to see additional energy in the 2.6 kilohertz band. So let's see if that happens. So that's pretty loud. Yes, so we can see the additional energy there. So that will conclude that demo. Okay. All right. So after confirming that the PES does potentially approximate the output of a microphone, we then wanted to evaluate if we could actually extract human speech from the PES. The setup we use for that is illustrated here. We have the speaker suspended 10 inches above the hard drive. The hard drive is enclosed in an external hard drive enclosure, and the fan on it is actually being powered at max power. So we extracted the PES from that setup, but we still have the problem of recovering speech from the PES readings. If our assumption is correct that the PES values approximate the output of a microphone, that is instantaneous air pressure readings, then they actually capture exactly what the PCM values of a WAV file are supposed to capture. So therefore, we can take those values, normalize them, and stick them into a WAV file. After doing that, we plotted the spectrogram. However, and we saw this in the demo as well, there's a pretty strong, a large quantity of noise, especially around 2 kilohertz and 8 kilohertz. This is due to a number of reasons. One is platter eccentricity. That is that the disks on the hard drive are they're not completely flat, and they're not perfectly round either, not perfectly circular. Also, due to thermal drift, expansion of aluminum components in the hard drive can actually result in PES readings errors that are 300 times the width of a track. And furthermore, the write head itself is rapidly moving across the surface of the disk, and the disk itself is spinning at 7,200 revolutions per minute. There's a fair amount of turbulence, so it's not hard to see why there's a lot of noise there. However, after making use of both linear and nonlinear DSP techniques, digital signal processing techniques, to clean the noise, we got the following results. So this is from a Harvard sentence spoken at the drive. And so the Harvard sentences are a standardized corpus of phonetically balanced sentences. And so when we did this, we could hear a muffled conversation when we played it at 75 dBA. However, to get a better SNR, this was played back at 85 dBA. We suspect that more advanced DSP techniques could substantially reduce that threshold, though. So yeah, at the top, we have, that is the time domain from the audio recovered from the hard drive while it's in the enclosure with the fan powered at max. Beneath it is the original. So just by a visual inspection, we can see that there is substantial correlation between the two. And then the cross correlation beneath that confirms, the spike at 0 confirms that correlation between the two of them. So in addition to our qualitative measures, we also quantitatively evaluated the fidelity of our side channel. One measure that we focused on particular is the PESQ-MOS. And so that's actually recommended by the Telecommunication Union's standardization sector for estimating the intelligibility of speech. So the baseline, which is the raw audio, received a value of 1.7 dB. When we recovered audio from the hard drive when it was not in enclosure, we got a value of 1.4 dB. And surprisingly, when we put it in the enclosure, it actually increased to 1.6 dB. And we believe that is because the larger surface area of the container, it captures more energy from the oncoming wave and then transmits it to the hard drive. But I mean, what do those numbers mean? I think it's best if we actually hear an audio sample for ourselves. So this is the same Harvard. So I don't know how well you could hear that. But if you put it on your headphones on and you play it pretty loudly, you can make it out usually. Oops. Okay, so we also evaluated our side channel by use of the Shazam music recognition app. So what we did was we played Iron Maiden's The Trooper at the hard drive. Then we extracted the audio and took that audio and played it back at a phone that was running the Shazam app. And so the results are that it did successfully recognize the song. However, it required a higher volume, 90 dBA, which is actually quieter than the typical volume that this song is played at. But the increased required volume is largely due to the fact that filtering actually didn't work at all. And so we believe that's because noise getting discrimination errors actually ruin the spectral fingerprint. And the way Shazam works is that it takes a spectral fingerprint of the sample and matches it against its database of songs. So our particular filtering technique was not helpful at all. But the takeaway from this case study was that even though the recovered audio sounded completely unintelligible, it was extremely poor, there was still enough information contained in the PES for a state-of-the-art classifier to recognize which song it was. And we believe the takeaway from that is that our results could also stand to benefit from a similar state-of-the-art classifier. But beyond using a more sophisticated classifier, there are some further potential improvements that we could use for our attack. One is an attacker who can leverage multiple hard drives can then average the signals that come out of them. And since white noise will average to 0 and the signal will average to itself, the result will improve the signal-to-noise ratio substantially. And another technique that builds off the same principle is that even if an attacker only has one hard drive, the attacker can use autocorrelation to find repetitions of the same utterance, since we often say the same words while speaking. And And by finding those repetitions, you can then average those together in the same manner and improve the signal-to-noise ratio. So now we'll discuss some mitigations. The best way to prevent, or one way that we discuss to defend systems that are already deployed in the field is via ultrasonic masking. So the idea here is that a white noise generator plays sound in the ultrasonic range so that it doesn't disturb humans. However, due to the limited and fixed sampling rate of the hard drive, that will be aliased down into a mask in the audible range and will then mask human voice. And the most common sense mitigation for future drives is to simply require digital signatures on the firmware. Empirically, though, Zadok et al. Did not find any signatures in use on the hard drives they examined. So in conclusion, we believe that our attack sheds light on a new class of attacks wherein devices that were not meant to be sensors in the first place can still be used to potentially sense the physical world and intrude on user privacy. We also found that defenses for already deployed systems are quite difficult. And we answered in the affirmative that a hard drive can approximate a crude microphone. And some other applications of our technique could potentially be any other device that measures mechanical disturbance. For example, printers, which also make use of a high-precision feedback control loop. And with that, I will be happy to take questions.
We have time for a couple questions.
Great talk. Really enjoyed the demonstrations as well. I had a quick question about just the patent. Is it possible, at least in theory, to use noise cancellation techniques to get rid of the noise and then use your techniques on top of it?
You're talking about entirely post-processing?
Yeah, because I'm not sure what part, like I don't understand the technology in the hard drive, and that's where the most of the noise comes. But if it's possible to just, if you go back to your image on where you had the noise and the original signal and the autocorrelation, yeah, I think,
yeah.
No, the blue ones, the blue.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, this one. So if you just remove that central band in some sense from the top image of noise, then you're kind of left with what is the original signal, right? Like
Just remove the center? Take out
the band is sort of the noise, and then there's the signal overlaid on top of it, right?
Sure.
So is it possible to, something like what a headphone does, like a noise cancellation where you try to remove the noise synthetically? And
I mean, so we did remove the strongest band of baseline noise just through like a band stop filter.
Okay.
So noise canceling headphones, those actually play a wave that cancels it in real time.
I see.
You would actually need to be physically present to do that in our case, right?
I see. Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We have one question out here first.
It was a very nice talk. I have one question, was related to the previous question. What kind of signal processing techniques you were using, and were you able to recover the speech in real time, or was it like offline processing?
Yeah, so I did it entirely offline. I suspect that it can be done in real time, though. Yes. So basically, beyond just using a band stop to filter out the heaviest bands of the persistent noise, we use also special noise gating, and so that I won't get into exactly how that works, but it's a common way to clean human speech from noisy audio. So, yeah.
I noticed that this seems to be due to resonances in mechanical things within the hard drive itself. You refer to two papers that looked into the causes of this. And I wondered, as a defensive measure, could you add just random little things into the hard drive with a variety of different resonances and kind of random amplification, so that when it received a signal, it just kind of reverberated with white noise. Would that be a reasonable defense? Or?
Yeah, so you're thinking kind of change the frequency response so that it's weaker in the bands where human speech is located?
Just to add random things that will jiggle, so it's as if you tapped it and it would go, meow.
So the thing is, it does need to track the head, to keep on track very closely, because it needs to be, I think, within like 7 nanometers for high performance drives to write to a sector. So I don't know if adding additional noise to that is the solution, because then the hard drive can't be as, you can't lay the tracks as densely anymore then.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
One more. Time for one more question.
Well, I think my question was going to be very similar as far as could you sample less often without losing much performance, but it sounds like you can't. I was a little curious, is there any way you could inject sound to control the hard drive, like force it to read the wrong sector? Is that feasible?
So we looked in that briefly, actually, in the Blue Note paper we had at Oakland last year. So the thing is that the head will refuse, the controller will not write if it's not within the correct margins. We did not manage to find anything too fruitful in that direction. Yeah.
Okay, great. Why don't we thank Andrew and then thank all the speakers from the session.